So it's 5 p.m. across India. I am Tanvi Taneja, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. Over the next half an hour, we'll get you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. And my colleague, Ollie Barrett, is joining me from London. Ollie, good to have you with us.
Hello Tanvi, hope you are very well. It's 11:30 a.m. here in the UK, 12:30 across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, the latest from the Middle East crisis. Presidents Biden and Xi meet in California, and Canada's Prime Minister under pressure to go. First, the headlines.
Israeli president insists on the need of a strong force in Gaza to prevent Hamas from re-emerging, whereas US President Joe Biden warns occupying Gaza would be a big mistake. US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping agree to open a presidential hotline, resume military-to-military communications, and work to curb fentanyl production in their first face-to-face talks in a year. Britain's new Foreign Secretary David Cameron meets Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev on his first working visit abroad. And India's Defence Minister tells ASEAN counterparts that New Delhi is committed to freedom of navigation and unimpeded lawful commerce in international waters. First updates on the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli President Isaac Herzog has said that a very strong force may be needed to remain in Gaza in the near future to prevent Hamas from re-emerging after the conflict. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden said that he had made it clear to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that a two-state solution was the only way to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict and that occupying Gaza would be a big mistake. Meanwhile, Israeli military chief Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari confirmed that Israeli troops found weapons, combat gear and technological equipment inside the Al-Shifa hospital.
Have found weapons, intelligence, military technology and military equipment. Additionally, an operational command center and technological assets belonging to Hamas. The technology and the materials have been sent to intelligence for inspection and review.
Now, DD India's Sarah Coates joins us live from Tel Aviv. Sarah, what is Israel saying about its operation at the Al-Shifa hospital?
Hello there, Tanvi. Well, look, they say it is continuing this targeted, precise operation happening inside the grounds of Al-Shifa Hospital right now. There are pictures coming in from the ground of armoured bulldozers being supported by Israeli tanks, with Hebrew media saying that this is because these bulldozers need to go in and dig out concrete from these tunnels, which Israel continues to allege run right underneath Al-Shifa Hospital. Now, as you mentioned, there have been pictures released by the Israeli military of what it says are Hamas guns, other Hamas paraphernalia, but what hasn't been released is any evidence yet of these tunnels, of this underground nucleus, this beating heart, as Israel likes to call it, of Hamas. But look, one other thing, Tanvi, that the military is looking for, of course, are these 240 hostages. It is unknown where they are or their whereabouts inside of the strip. And we just heard confirmation, actually just coming in right then, that the Israeli War Cabinet will actually meet tonight at 8:30 local time to discuss a potential progression of these negotiations that are being facilitated by Qatar between Israel and Hamas to potentially release some of these captives.
And Sarah, what more can you tell us about the situation in the south of the Gaza Strip?
Well, look, we do understand from a number of residents there inside Gaza, Tanvi, that the IDF has now begun dropping leaflets on homes down in Khan Yunis, which is in the south. We're hearing these leaflets were dropped east of Khan Yunis, telling them to evacuate. Now, this could suggest that the military operation inside the Strip may be widening. Right now, it's mainly been concentrated to the north of the Gaza Strip, but this could mean that Israeli forces are now expanding. Now, also, the IDF hit a home, or the home, I should say, of the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. They bombed that home a few hours ago, but look, it is unknown at this hour whether anybody was inside, because he actually lives abroad. He lives in between Qatar and Turkey, so no confirmation yet as to whether anyone was inside, but certainly a huge military presence on the ground inside Gaza.
Thank you, Sarah, for those updates. Now, as Sarah Coates was telling us, Israel claims that its fighter jet struck top Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh's house in Gaza. It added that Haniyeh's house was being used as a terrorist infrastructure and that it often served as a meeting point for Hamas's senior leaders to direct terror attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers. Haniyeh, who is Hamas's political bureau chief, is currently living in Qatar. Further, 6 injured people were rushed into a hospital in Jerusalem after 3 suspected Palestinian attackers fired at a checkpoint between Jerusalem and the West Bank city. Israel's ambulance service said 1 person was critically injured, but no casualties were reported as yet. The Israeli authorities claim that 3 terrorists who came in a suspicious vehicle opened fire and were neutralized by security forces stationed at the crossing. On to America now. US President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have agreed to resume their high-level military communications in their first face-to-face talks in a year on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco yesterday. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, the meet yesterday delivered a surprise notice. President Biden calling Xi a dictator once again.
He did indeed, Tanvi, and we'll get more on those comments in a moment. But Joe Biden and Xi Jinping did agree to open a presidential hotline and resume those military-to-military communications. So there was some tangible progress in their first face-to-face talks in a year. DD India's Ira Spitzer reports from the summit in San Francisco.
This highly anticipated meeting between the 2 leaders of the world's largest economies has wrapped up here on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco. Now, this meeting took place at a location about an hour's drive south of the city, and Presidents Biden and Xi spent about 4 hours together. The meeting included a working lunch followed by a walk in the gardens of this palatial estate where the meeting was being held. Now, expectations were somewhat low going in as far as at least having any major announcements on some of the big areas of disagreement between the 2 countries, including the U.S. and China's position on the island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory, as well as the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. So we didn't see any major breakthroughs on those issues, although the 2 sides did discuss that. Where we did see some progress, perhaps the biggest outcome of the meeting was the resumption of military-to-military communications between the 2 countries. Those communications had essentially been cut off from the Chinese side after a series of disagreements, including the visit by then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan last year. The other big outcome from the U.S. side was an agreement to work with the Chinese government to limit Chinese firms who are involved in the production of fentanyl components. Fentanyl is the powerful synthetic opioid, which has been largely responsible for the major overdose crisis here in the United States. So, reporting for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
But US President Joe Biden again called his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping a dictator.
We're talking to our competitors, and the key, and just talking, just being blunt with one another, so there's no misunderstanding, as a key element to maintaining global stability and delivering for the American people. Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that's based on a form of government totally different than ours.
And that remark could risk derailing progress made at the talks, with China now hitting back.
This kind of statement is extremely incorrect and irresponsible political manipulation which China opposes. It needs to be pointed out that there are always some ill-intentioned individuals attempting to damage Sino-US relations, but their attempts will not succeed.
The US Senate has averted a partial government shutdown as it passed a stopgap spending bill and sent it to President Joe Biden to sign into law before a weekend deadline. The 87-11 vote marked the end of this year's third fiscal standoff in Congress that saw lawmakers bring Washington to the brink of defaulting on its more than $31 trillion in debt. A partial shutdown would have led to delayed salary payments to 4 million federal employees. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under pressure to resign or be forced out of the Liberal Party leadership due to his declining popularity in opinion polls. Even some members of his own political party are calling on him to quit amid public anger about housing and inflation. Ukraine says it destroyed 16 drones and 1 missile which were launched by Russia in overnight strikes. Ukrainian forces deployed air defences in the western region of the country, while an air raid alert was also declared in several areas as well. Kyiv has also accused Russia of targeted shelling of a power station in the eastern Donetsk region. DD India's Megami Lim has sent this report from Kyiv.
Ukraine's Air Force said it had shot down 1 missile and 16 out of 18 Shahed-type drones launched by Russia overnight as the country braces for another winter of blackouts caused by Russian strikes. Russia also attacked a residential and educational building in the Kharkiv region with a S-300 missile overnight. So far, no casualties have been reported. The frequency of air raid alerts have increased in Ukraine over the past few days as Moscow has steadily ramped up its attacks on critical infrastructure, especially in the eastern parts of Ukraine. Russian strikes on Wednesday damaged a medium-pressure gas pipeline in the eastern Kharkiv region and targeted an area near a thermal power plant in the Donetsk region. Moscow's forces also struck a residential building on the same day in the eastern Ukrainian town of Selidov, and rescuers continued to clear the rubble on Thursday, where 1 more body was recovered, taking the death toll to 3 people. Megumi Lim in Kyiv reporting for DD India.
Meanwhile, the UK's new Foreign Secretary David Cameron has been in Kyiv on his first working visit abroad after returning to government. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky received the new UK Foreign Minister for talks on the supply of weapons and ways to further strengthen Ukraine's air defence systems. They also focused on ways to protect critical infrastructure. In the latest sanctions against Moscow over its war against Ukraine, the European Commission has proposed a ban on imports of diamonds and liquid petroleum gas from Russia. They are also set to tighten other measures, such as the oil price cap, the transit of goods through Russia, and technologies that could boost the country's industrial capabilities. Agreement on the final package is set to take weeks, as the deal will require unanimous backing of all 27 EU member states. In response, Russia says imposing sanctions is part of a hybrid war influenced by the West.
This is not just a package, it's a hybrid war. You need to understand this. Essentially, because of the never-ending flow of sanctions, Washington is using these sanctions for its anti-Russian policy without even asking Brussels or the people of these European countries if it's in their interest and whether it contradicts their aim and goals.
More now from DD India's Alex Cadier in Brussels.
Officials I've spoken to about this round of sanctions is very clear. It's the fact that they want to prevent Russia from being able to finance its invasion of Ukraine. And to the point made by the Russian officials about a hybrid war, the EU officials are very clear. These sanctions did not exist and were not put in place before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That was the cause of all of this pushback from the European Union. The goal, as I mentioned, is to reduce Russia's ability to finance that invasion. $4.5 billion will be wiped off the Russian economy from that diamond ban. So that will be the ban of the sale of all diamonds, rough or in jewelry, across the European Union. That is a huge market for those diamonds coming out of the mines in Siberia. The reason it took so long is because Belgium, right here in Belgium, has one of the world's biggest diamond hubs in Antwerp, about an hour from where I'm speaking to you from. So that was the reason why there was a bit of a delay. Belgium is now on board. These proposals will go to the member states. They will discuss them for the first time tomorrow to go through the detail, cross the T's, dot the I's, and then these sanctions will be signed off by the leaders in mid-December. The other point of this 12th round of sanction is really tightening the screws and closing the loopholes that were left from the 11 first rounds of sanctions. So avoiding circumvention will be the big focus. So, for example, countries near Russia that are importing goods and then illegally sending them to Russia, things like that will be tightened. We know that the oil price cap that you mentioned capped the sale of Russian oil to anywhere in the EU to $60. That has not been easily enforceable. So again, the focus will be on closing that loophole. So very much making sure the existing sanctions have their impact, have their effect, and also that new Russian diamond ban.
The Kremlin says the Czech Republic's decision to freeze Russian state-owned properties was illegal and says Moscow may retaliate against what it calls a hostile step. The Czech government said it had frozen Russian state-owned properties on its territory, expanding sanctions imposed on Moscow over the war in Ukraine. German authorities are conducting nationwide searches of 54 locations across 7 federal states related to an alleged Hezbollah-backed Islamic center in Hamburg. The Islamic Center of Hamburg is under suspicion of supporting Hezbollah and acting against a constitutional order. Very much a developing story, that one, Tanvi, in Germany. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Ollie. Ollie Barrett joining us from our London bureau. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Southeast Asia's regional bloc ASEAN says it will not interfere in the internal problems of Myanmar as junta there reports heavy assaults by insurgents. And Spain's acting Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez set to secure another term, ending 4-month political deadlock. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has underlined the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to ensure peace and stability in the world. He was speaking in Jakarta at the ASEAN Defence Ministers Meeting Plus, in which India is participating as a dialogue partner. DD India's Patrick Falk reports.
Well, speaking before, the defence ministers of ASEAN, Rajnath Singh, talked about the importance of engagement and dialogue, and also said that India is committed to freedom of navigation, overflight and unimpeded commerce in international waters in line with global norms. There was no mention of China, but there was no doubt a reference to China's growing military assertiveness in the South China Sea. These would have been welcome words for the Philippines in particular, which has been embroiled in several testy confrontations with China over territorial disputes in recent days. India is participating in Jakarta as a dialogue partner. It is an opportunity for it to deepen security ties with ASEAN member nations, and reports say that Singh will meet with the defense chief of Vietnam and that the two sides will aim to deepen security ties, and that India may also share Brahma and Akash air defense missiles with the Southeast Asian nations. In addition, reports say that there will be a meeting with Indonesian Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto, and that the two will be discussing joint patrols of the Malacca Straits. That's important in particular because Prabowo Subianto is currently the front runner in polls for Indonesia's presidential race. There is talk about a Quad Plus grouping to include Indonesia as well. And if Prabowo Subianto does become Indonesia's next leader, it is likely that he will be the one who decides on whether or not to sign off on that.
So Indonesia officially handed over the chairmanship of the ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting to Laos on Thursday. The bloc is currently holding its Defence Ministers meeting in Jakarta. Representatives from non-ASEAN countries, such as that of China and South Korea, also attended the summit. Staying in the region, Myanmar's junta has reported a heavy assault by insurgents and asked government to prepare for emergencies. Even the media has asked those with military experience to prepare to serve. Junta spokesperson said that the military was facing heavy assaults from a number of armed rebel soldiers in various regions. Meanwhile, Myanmar's military rulers have ordered all government staff and those with military experience to prepare to serve in case of an emergency. In the meantime, in ASEAN Defence Ministers meeting, Indonesian Defence Minister said that Southeast Asia's regional bloc ASEAN will not interfere in the internal problems of any one country. The India President's bodyguard is all set to celebrate its 250 grand years today. Let's go live to the event now.
देवियों और सज्जनों, आपसे अनुरोध है कि जब निशान टोली परेड ग्राउंड में प्रवेश करे और जब निशान टोली आपके सामने से गुजरे तो कृपया अपने स्थानों पर खड़े हो जाएं। जो लोग वर्दी में हैं वो सलामी देंगे। ऐसी क्या खास बात है रेजिमेंट के निशान में जो हम निशान टोली के सामने खड़े होकर सलामी देते हैं? दोस्तों, सेना के बहादुर जवानों के परम बलिदान, उनके खून की आहुति से रंगा होता है रेजिमेंट का निशान। पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी बहादुर सैनिक अपने देश के लिए नाम, नमक और निशान के लिए अपनी जान कुर्बान करते आए हैं। इसीलिए दोस्तों, जब निशान टोली हमारे सामने से गुजरती है, हम अपने वीरों के परम बलिदान, उनके निशान को सलामी देते हैं। तिरंगा धारक रिसालदार भवानी सिंह, राष्ट्रपति जी का निशान धारक रिसालदार सुब्रत सिंह और राष्ट्रपति के रक्षक निशान धारक रिसालदार कुलबीर सिंह संधू।
कदम कदम तुर्की और सरपट से नंबर 1 डिवीजन आगे राष्ट्रीय रक्षक सेक्शन दड़गाम कदम कदम
देवियों और सज्जनों, राष्ट्रपति अंगरक्षक रेजिमेंट अब मंच से गुजरेगी 3 बार। पहले कदम कदम, फिर दुड़की और फिर सरपट की चाल पर। जाहिर है मन में ये सवाल उठता है कि रेजिमेंट 3 बार मंच से क्यों गुजरेगी। ये सवाल जरूरी है और इस सवाल का जवाब जानना और भी जरूरी है। सभी फोटोग्राफर से निवेदन है, कृपया परेड ग्राउंड से दूर रहिए, अपने कैमरा के फ्लैश बंद रखिए। By the Commandant, Colonel Amit Belwal. Colonel Amit Belwal astride Brutus, leading the parade, followed by his trumpeter Dafadar Manjeet Kumar Dagar, astride Alexander. The Nishan Toli before the base now. National flag is being carried by Risaldar Bhavani Singh, astride Victory. The President's standard of the bodyguard is being carried by Risaldar Sundar Singh Tanwar, astride Ace. And the regimental standard of the President's bodyguard is being carried by Risaldar Kulbir Singh Sandhu, astride Amigo. The color escorts are Risaldar Mukesh Dalal and Naib Risaldar Satinder Singh. Number 2 division के पीछे रेजिमेंट के सेकंड इन कमांड लेफ्टिनेंट कर्नल रमाकांत यादव, और जैसा कि मैंने आपको बताया इनके घोड़े का नाम है सुल्तान, भारत के सबसे ऊंचे घोड़ों में से एक। और देखिए कितनी खूबसूरती से डंके की ताल के साथ अश्व योद्धाओं ने अपनी चाल बदल ली। सवाल आपके सामने ये था कि परेड 3 बार मंच से क्यों गुजरती है। तो दोस्तों, परमात्मा ने इंसान को 2 पैर और 1 चाल दी, लेकिन परमात्मा ने घोड़ों को 4 पैर और 3 अलग अलग प्रकार की चालें दी हैं। कदम कदम की चाल में हर पैर जमीन पे एक एक करके गिरता है। 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4। दुड़की की चाल, जिसे अंग्रेजी में ट्रॉट कहते हैं, जोड़ी जोड़ी से पैर जमीन पे गिरते हैं, जो आपके सामने अब हो रहा है। देखिए, अगला बायां, पीछा दायां, अगला दाहिना, पिछला बायां। और इस चाल की ताल है 1 2 1 2 1 2। इसके बाद सरपट की बात करेंगे। सैन्य संगीत की इस धुन का नाम है कील रोड। राष्ट्रपति जी का निशान और राष्ट्रपति अंगरक्षक का निशान। कितना ऐतिहासिक दिवस है। विश्व की सबसे पुरानी एक्टिव रेजिमेंट राष्ट्रपति अंगरक्षक आज अपने 250 साल की सालगिरह मनाते हुए 4-4 के सेक्शन में बहुत ही शानदार ड्रेसिंग के साथ। और वो देखिए, डंके की संकेत के साथ चाल बदल ली हमारे अश्व योद्धाओं ने। इस धुन का नाम है जिप्सी डांस। और घोड़ों की इस चाल को सरपट कहते हैं। इसमें पहले एक कदम जमीन पे लगता है, फिर जोड़े के साथ 2 कदम और फिर चौथा। इसीलिए सरपट की चाल होती है 1 2 3 1 2 3। जरा गौर से देखिए, ट्रम्पेटर का घोड़ा सफेद है और निशान धारक का घोड़ा भी सफेद है। तो दोस्तों, ये एक बहुत पुरानी सैन्य प्रथा है कि ट्रम्पेटर, ब्यूगलर, संकेतधारी और ध्वजधारियों के घोड़े हमेशा से सफेद रहे हैं, क्योंकि युद्ध के मैदान में संकेतधारी और ध्वजधारियों पर कभी हमला नहीं किया जाता। Would now reform at the inspection line and then advance in review order.
देवियों और स्वजनों, आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। मुझे आज अपने अंगरक्षकों की गौरवशाली सेवा के 250 वर्ष पूरे होने पर और उन्हें प्रेसिडेंट स्टैंडर्ड्स ऑफ बॉडीगार्ड एंड रेजिमेंटल स्टैंडर्ड्स का सम्मान प्रदान किए जाने के अवसर पर आयोजित कार्यक्रम में भाग लेकर बहुत प्रसन्नता हो रही है। मैं पीबीजी के सभी अधिकारियों, जूनियर कमीशन अधिकारियों और मेरे रेजिमेंट के सभी अंगरक्षकों को ड्रिल और माउंटेन परेड के उल्लेखनीय प्रदर्शन के लिए बधाई देती हूँ। मुझे सभी घोड़ों के उत्तम स्वास्थ्य और उनकी उच्च स्तर की देखभाल की देखकर भी बहुत खुशी हो रही है। सभी घोड़ों के उत्तम प्रदर्शन के बिना आज का आयोजन सफल नहीं हो पाता। मुझे ये देखकर प्रसन्नता हो रही है कि पीबीजी के पूर्व कमांडेंट, अधिकारी, जेसीएस और सैनिक भी आज इस ऐतिहासिक अवसर पर यहाँ उपस्थित है। मैं आप सबका इस आयोजन में स्वागत करती हूँ। आज का ये आयोजन इसलिए भी विशेष है क्योंकि द प्रेसिडेंट्स बॉडीगार्ड को 60 वर्षों के बाद एक बार फिर से सेना में सर्वोच्च स्टैंडर्ड यानी प्रेसिडेंट स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ बॉडीगार्ड प्रदान किया गया है। साथ ही रेजिमेंटल स्टैंडर्ड्स का सम्मान भी पीबीजी को आज दिया गया है। मैं इस उपलब्धि के लिए पीबीजी की पूरी टीम को बहुत बधाई देती हूँ। मैं पीबीजी को उनकी उत्कृष्ट सैन्यों, परंपराओं और लोकाचारों तथा उनके सभी कार्यों में प्रोफेशनलिज्म और डिसिप्लिन के लिए भी बधाई देती हूँ। देवियों और स्वजनों, महाराणा प्रताप जैसे योद्धाओं और उनके वीर घोड़ों की गाथाओं ने सदियों से हमारी पीढ़ियों को प्रेरित किया है। आप वर्तमान समय में हमारी भूमि की इस समृद्ध विरासत और संस्कृति के ध्वज बहाकर राष्ट्र को आप सब पर गर्व। मैं आपकी सेवाओं की हृदय से सराहना करती हूँ। मैं ये कहना चाहूँगी, मेरे आत्मसैन्य बल होने के कारण ये सम्मान आपके लिए अतिरिक्त जिम्मेदारी भी लेकर आता है। मुझे विश्वास है आज राष्ट्रपति भवन की सर्वोत्तम परंपराओं को बनाए रखने के लिए अद्वितीय समर्पण, अनुशासन और वीरता के साथ प्रयासरत रहेंगे और हमारी महान सेना की सभी रेजिमेंट्स के लिए आदर्श प्रस्तुत करेंगे। मैं इस ऐतिहासिक अवसर पर फिर से आप सबको बधाई देती हूँ और आपके उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए मंगल कामना करती हूँ। आप सदा ऐसे ही मातृभूमि की सेवा करते रहें और देश का गौरव बढ़ाते रहें। धन्यवाद। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
राष्ट्र जी की जय पुकारेंगे। राष्ट्र जी की जय। राष्ट्र जी की जय। राष्ट्र जी की जय।
That was President of India, Draupadi Murmu, presenting the President's and regimental standards to the President's bodyguard on their 250 years grand anniversary celebrations in New Delhi. Remember, the President's bodyguard is the most elite and senior-most regiment of the Indian Army. Their pomp, valor and grandeur on display there. That's all in this edition of DD India Global. We'll be back with another edition of the show at 7:30 p.m. IST. Do join us then. And also let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. That's it from all of us here. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.